everyone. You're welcome to the JMA Connections. Accept hearty greetings from me, John AKUROH, this Monday. This Monday is the 4th day of May 2026. And this Monday was, of course, Country Sunday, as we call Ghost Towns Day, all over the territory of the Southern Cameroons. I want to begin by extending very hearty regards to the people of Kupeng-Wanenguba County, the great county of Kupeng-Wanenguba. I mean, you saw the giants of Kupeng-Wanenguba shaking our way into this very interesting slot today. And so I took the opportunity to say hello to the people of DBC Aku, there's DBC 1, DBC 2, and also to the people of Njungo. Njungo is in the Upper Nkomombo area, and of course I want also to take this opportunity to say very hearty regards to the people of Ebamut. So that said, my dear people, this is another very interesting moment of communion on the JMA Connections today. Today we'll be looking at some very interesting issues. I bet you very, very interesting issues. And if this is your first time on this platform, please do the magic work. Go right ahead, hit on that subscribe button. And if you're just joining, share the link to this communication as much as you can. Let's get as many people as possible to be part of this very interesting and this very important show this day. And of course, I like to extend hearty regards to the top fans of this platform. Of course, you know yourselves. I don't want to call names because I run the risk of creating enmity by not mentioning everyone. Who is a top fan here. You are so many of you, and I want to thank you so much for your continuous support to the work that is being done on this platform. That said, there are a number of issues that we're going to be discussing today, and I just want to give a kind of should I say, a kind of overview of the issues we're going to be discussing today, so that you understand it's important for you not to move even one bit. Just anchor on your seat there, get a good glass of water, sip it, and let's begin this very interesting conversation. Of course, Alexis Mwele, the Supreme Court president that in 1992 had the temerity and the honesty to tell the entire world that the election was rigged, but his hands were tied, has died. And of course, he died just at the time that the country's first daughter, Brenda Biya, is telling the entire world that her father, Paul Biya, is dying, that he's really in dying mode, and that she fears for her life. And of course, the saga of the Biya family continues to rock Yaounde, and of course sending shock waves across the world as the family is now tearing itself in ways never before seen, and social media activists on both sides are clashing on something that you believe should have been a family issue that will be resolved very quietly. And of course, do not forget that Paul Biya has had expanded presidential powers to do whatever he can do, and some of those things he's already doing them. I'll be talking about them on this platform. Plus, we're definitely going to have a little mention of the general census, the combined general census that La République du Cameroon is announcing, and exactly how the people of the Southern Cameroons should look at it. So that said, I will begin this slot, of course, by talking slightly about this gentleman, Alexis Mwele. This was the president of the Supreme Court in Cameroon, who became very famous for saying in 1992, when he declared Paul Biya winner of the presidential election that saw Ni John Frundi, chairman of the Social Democratic Front, claim victory. And of course, a lot of things were done behind the scenes, and the president of the Supreme Court of the time was a gentleman you are seeing on my screen, Alexis Mwele. And on motion television, in motion pictures, said it to the entire world that he has seen a lot of irregularities that, of course, he definitely judged were, more than enough to cancel that particular election. But he said, despite identifying those irregularities, his hands were tied and there was nothing he could do. That was a clear admission of the fact that the person I'm going to declare as winner of this election did not win this election. Of course, when I'm looking at the image of Alexis de Pandamwele today, I visualized that day in 1992, where we were seated before our screens and watching him, read from one province to the other, and in the end said, "Est donc déclaré élu le candidat Paul Biya." And I recall exactly how the country descended into chaos immediately after, even if right inside the hall of those who were at the Supreme Court to witness the official proclamation of those results. A lot of people still recall the look on the face of the U.S. ambassador to Cameroon of the time, Mrs. Frances Cook. Her look clearly told everyone that they all, the diplomats, knew exactly that, that election was rigged, that Mr. Frundi's victory was stolen. And of course, we have had the opportunity to hear declassified information, testimonies from people who were alive at the time, who exchanged with some of those diplomats to the effect that the final decision was taken from Paris, that it was France that decided that Mr. Frundi, although he won the election, cannot be president of Cameroon. Although we have heard things from people like Ben Zongang and the others say, we sat, we decided, we up, we down, but the ultimate decision was made by France. Just like I said in my last broadcast, that France right now has also already made the decision that the person they expect to be president in Cameroon after Paul Biya will be Frank Biya. So this is a message. Always, when these things come, I remind the people of the southern Cameroons, these messages are clear. Everything that happens from day to day, month to month, year to year in La République du Cameroon tells the people of the southern Cameroons. These things always tell the people of the southern Cameroons that you don't belong. You will never belong. As far as France will call the shots, you will never belong. And La République du Cameroon has demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that it is going to be absolutely impossible for them to ever keep France out of their internal politics and internal policies. So what is clear to me today that should also be clear to you all, Southern Cameroonians out there, is that if we think that we should have a future, if we think that we should make our country a place to be, if we think that we can stop the brain drain from the Southern Cameroon to all other parts of the world and bring back our young, talented Southern Cameroonians to develop our land, then we have to do the needful. The hard way, which is the only way, is sending La République du Cameroon out of our land. That is all that we need to do. And I'm speaking today, which is a Monday. And the vast majority of the civilian population in the southern Cameroons are demonstrating every Monday clearly and telling the world that it will never be business as usual again with La République du Cameroon still occupying our territory. So this message was clear then, and I think it is even clearer today with the things that are going on in that country, that we have never belonged, we will never belong. So the people of the southern Cameroons, we are only a source of, of wealth. We are only considered as a farm where they exploit wealth, and our people considered as slaves that they can use any way they want. You recall, some of them generally refer to all southern Cameroonians as Lebamenda. And you hear what they say. They say, can't you add Tombamenda? You see the kind of demeaning approach that they really, just those kind of expressions should tell you exactly where they place you and where they place me on the inferior scale. And you are there fighting to belong to a place where you don't belong. And the events of every day prove to all and sundry that you don't belong. Again, on another scale, La République du Cameroon since 2017 has been appointing people in the southern Cameroons as councillors, as parliamentarians, as senators, even as regional waiting call. All of those things. Because the people of the southern Cameroons have made clear and abundantly clear that we do not want to participate in any elections organized by the Republic of Cameroon on our territory. And so therefore, year after year since 2017, whenever they've organized elections, they just pick their people and force them on us and use those people to impose their wills on us. And they are beginning to see it's giving them a lot of stress. So now they've just given Paul Biya absolute powers to keep now appointing those people to stay there by decree. Just as I was walking into the studio to begin this broadcast, of course, this piece of news dropped. It was read on CLTV, national station, the late evening news, that the president of La République du Cameroun, Paul Biya, whether it is himself who signed it or his, whoever is running that country who signed it, that he extended the mandate of municipal councillors to February 2027. To imagine that the election for municipal councillors, of course, local elections in La République du Cameroun, ought to have been held before the 2025 presidential election. They were supposed to have been held in 2025. First, they were extended to the end of the year. Afterwards, extended to 2026. Now extended to February 2027. So now the people do not have even a right to choose their own local representatives. And this is what it is. And the people know what game they are playing, because they have to continue making sure that the opposition political parties do not make inroads anywhere, do not share in governance anywhere, do not have any voice anywhere at the time they are working on what they consider to be a transition from Paul Biya to whoever he has chosen. And of course, I said it a while ago that the French government has opted for Frank Biya, although Chantal Biya has definitely said this will be over her dead body. They will first of all walk over her before imposing Frank Biya as president. And there's just so much going on, out there. We'll get onto that dossier. But before we get to that, I'd like to first of all talk about this combined census. I'm seeing that we're having some little technical issues there, but I'll resolve that pretty quickly. So this combined census that La République du Cameroun is talking about holding all over the national territory, including in the southern Cameroons, should definitely not have anything to do with our people. Because you see, they say they've allocated over 13 billion CFA francs for Cameroon's combined general census. The last time that La République du Cameroun organized a census, the results were never published. The results have never been published until today. At some point, you just had truncated estimates coming out. And from those truncated estimates, a lot of damage was done to the southern Cameroons. Because if you look at those estimates that they put out there, it gives you the impression that the entire southern Cameroons has a population of slightly over 3 million. The previous census results and the projections place the population of the southern Cameroons well over that. They themselves tell you, their country is of about 30 million and the southern Cameroon is about 20% of their population. Do the calculation yourself. And when some of those results came out, at that time I was still at the CLTV national station. I recall doing a paper in which we asked a lot of questions. Among the questions that we asked was there an epidemic, especially in the area they call themselves Northwest, and to some extent the far north region of La République du Cameroun? Was there any epidemic in the Northwest, which is in the southern Cameroons, or anyone at least in the far north region of La République du Cameroun, that we did not know? Because those results demonstrated that the populations, especially of the southern Cameroons, dropped to levels nobody could really understand. And then at the same time, they had always told everyone that the far north was the most thickly populated region in all of Cameroon. And I had the opportunity to work at CRTV Marua. And when I worked at CRTV Marua, I visited the far north region, and everywhere I went, I asked myself, I asked myself, where is that population they are talking about? And each time I say, oh no, they are up in the hills, oh no, they are up in the this, oh no, they are up in the that. But you go from community to community to see that population really the way they were talking about, and you only end up with questions. And the reason was, that was the area that they were assured of always playing political games each time there was a presidential election. But when they began sensing that they are approaching the era where they will have to answer questions to the people of northern Cameroon, who clearly continue to believe that it is their birthright to, host the next president, because Ahidjo handed over to Paul Biya, and Paul Biya had to hand over back to the north within what they usually call the north-south axis. The government decided, the Bulu Ekampeti decided that it was time to make their region the most populous. And suddenly, the central region became the most populous region in the country, with no explanation of exactly how that happened overnight. But everyone knows that there is no way any place will be more populous than the Electoral, because the population of the city of Douala alone will, shatter the records of what you claim to have in the central region. But for political reasons, they did that. So what is the use for another census? And if they are doing a census, perhaps that could help them in La République du Cameroun. Because when you conduct a census, the reasons generally are, this census is to provide data that will help in designing or determining the development of the country. You want to use that data to know exactly which area deserves what, and which area would deserve what. Those figures generally help in designing policy. And if a government actually wants to use social statistics correctly, those figures will guide them to understand where to carve new administrative units, where to locate specific kinds of projects to attain a greater the greater mass of the people. But for La République du Cameroun, the census is essentially political. So setting aside 13 billion CFA to carry out a census whose results will never come out does not really make any sense for me. And the people of the southern Cameroons, we are not interested in being counted. So I'm just urging the people of the southern Cameroons, La République du Cameroun will not do the census for us. So I think that at the appropriate moment, we are going to have a conversation about this, and the entire leadership of the Southern Cameroon's liberation movement will take a strong and I guess unanimous position on that particular issue. And of course, the people will be notified. That said, I'd like us to open the Biya dossier at this time, and there is just so much in it. Don't shake. Look at this, and I'd like us to share this thought together. Robert K. Greenleaf says, the most serious failure of leadership is a failure to foresee. Looks like just some one careless statement like that, but it's extremely potent. Where it says, the most serious failure of leadership is a failure to foresee. Generally, ancient wisdom will guide leaders to identify problems that could move from being just normal issues of day-to-day life to the column of emergencies. And if you do not foresee some of these problems, that if not resolved quickly, could become emergencies, that will be the beginning of a calamitous end to such a leader. First, Paul Biya had the opportunity with a system to address the situation in the southern Cameroons. This situation started brewing way back in the early 90s. 1992, when Fundi won the election and they stole it. 1993, with the All Anglophone Conference 1. 1994, with the All Anglophone Conference 2. And of course, with the creation of the SCNC, the Southern Cameroons National Council, and the elaboration of resolutions that indicated there was a trigger clause that after a reasonable period of time, if the issues raised by the people were not addressed, the people will declare independence. The people will seek to restore the independence of the Southern Cameroons. They didn't see that. Biya could have seen exactly what happened at the Tripartite Conference of 1993, where they went to talk constitution, and at which, rather than addressing legitimate concerns of the people of the Southern Cameroons, that said, let's go back to the two-state federation so that at least we can live in harmony. You address your affairs, we address our affairs, and we meet at the federal level. They ignored it, and of course, I said it here, that Joseph Owona rather threatened that if they continue to talk about it, the Betis were going to create a Betis state and they secede from the Republic of Cameroon. And I want everyone to know that even right up to this moment that I'm talking, that secessionist project for the Betis is still not off the table, because it's clear in their minds, if they do not succeed to force in Frank Biya as president, something happens in the country and some other people are taking power, they will immediately secede and form a Betis state, because they are conscious of the damage they have done to the country, conscious of what they have done to other segments of the country, and especially with the northerners, and they are really afraid of what could happen to them if power will slide from their hands into the hands of other people. So that project is still solidly on the table. But besides that project, there is an issue here that is begging for that question. What kind of system is Paul Biya running right now? Is he still interested in letting anyone, even across the world, know that he is still in charge? Because the level of cacophony in that country right now defeats human imagination. Just how the international finance bodies continue to pour money into Cameroon is something that is mind-blowing. Because no one understands how a failed state, a clearly rogue state, a state that is not governed at all right now, a state that is descending completely into chaos and everyone is seeing, how that state continues to get the confidence of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other global finance bodies that continue to give credit upon credit, loan upon loan to that country. That is something that is still leaving a lot of people wondering. A lot of pundits across the world are asking questions. People want to know what exactly is going on. Because this is strange. If you look at that country, it is completely finished. The level of chaos is unimaginable. And what happened to Joseph Dion Ngute 2 days ago is something that is, that is rocking everybody's minds. Everyone has known right up to this point that Ferdinand Gongo has the habit of undermining Dion Ngute, grinding him in any way, pounding him in every direction, humiliating him, getting him totally disillusioned, and making sure the man sits as if he does not exist. But no one expected that things could get right up to this point. Because the level where things are right now, my goodness, everyone is wondering, is there still a president in that country? Is there still order in that country? Are the people of that country still conscious that their country is being, completely smashed to levels never before known? And do these politicians still have at least some blood running in their veins? And do they still have brains? Or they have all become jellyfishes? Because what happened to Dion Ngute at the airport is the peak of humiliation. Because as you would understand, Joseph Dion Ngute was informed by the civil cabinet of the presidency of the Republic of Cameroon that he would travel to Libreville in Gabon to represent the president of the Republic, Paul Biya, at a ceremony where they were going to, inaugurate some very mighty edifice named after the late president of Gabon, Omar Bongo. And so Joseph Dion Ngute picked this information and found himself in a very tight corner to make preparations for that travel. Joseph Dion Ngute's cabinet started working overnight to secure an aircraft. Just hear that, to secure an aircraft that will fly him to Gabon. Imagine this is a country where the prime minister, head of government, is to go on official mission to represent the president of the country. They are finding it difficult to get an aircraft that will fly the prime minister to Gabon and back. Because that's what they said. So that the prime minister's office was battling seriously to get an aircraft. Why? Because Cameroon does not have any official aircraft. None. Even the president of the Republic, Paul Biya, no longer has an aircraft. But when he took over power in 1982, he inherited 2 presidential aircraft at the presidential palace. One was the Pelican, and the other was the Sparrow, what they call in French, l'Hirondelle. And even as we speak, they don't have an aircraft. And so the prime minister's office had to be going through a lot of struggles to secure an aircraft. In the end, they had one. The prime minister actually traveled all the way to the airport. All arrangements were made. His advance team went to the airport. Way before him. He arrived 30 minutes after them. Went through the entire protocol that is supposed to be followed at the airport and boarded the aircraft. Boarded the aircraft. Was ready for the flight. That is when Chief Dr. Joseph Dion Ngute is informed that you cannot make the trip anymore. Your trip has been cancelled. And that the trip has been cancelled, and he will be replaced by the Cameroon ambassador to Libreville. That ambassador has been designated to represent the head of state. Just look at this. In normal circumstances, Joseph Dion Ngute would be having audience with the president of the Republic at least once every week. When it was happening, it was every Friday. But after some time, everything cut off. The prime minister, head of government, cannot recall the last time he had audience with Paul Biya at the presidency. A working audience. That's the prime minister, head of government, cannot recall the last time he had a one-on-one with the head of state to receive instructions on how to run the country. And these are now people at the presidency in their all-out fight, deciding one moment the prime minister will want to represent the head of state, the next minute he will not go. So Joseph Dion Ngute was humiliated beyond imagination, seated already in an aircraft of Cameco that he got at the last minute at the Simalene International Airport, waiting for the plane to taxi off and for him to get to Libreville, only to find himself being asked to step out of that aircraft and drive right back home because his trip had been cancelled. By who? Of course, by the vice god of the presidency of the Republic. There you find right there. By Ferdinand Gongo. Painful. shameful, humiliating. You don't even know what is worse. What is worse is that when the Pope, Leo XIV, was about to visit Cameroon, when it was expected in Cameroon, recall on this platform, I announced here that plans were being made for Brenda Biya to be the one to receive the Pope upon arrival at the airport in the place of his father. Prior to that visit, there were a lot of movements. Brenda Biya was received by the French embassy about 2-3 times, and sometimes very late in the night. He even had to take a trip at which he had to meet some serious French officials, out there in Switzerland and wherever. A lot of things were being done to see if they could force through a decree appointing Brenda Biya vice president just before the Pope's arrival, so that Brenda Biya should receive the Pope at the airport. At the last minute, things could not go because Madame Chantal Biya stood in the way of having that decision materialized at the presidency, while the French had already done everything. And I guess that should be one of the things that Emmanuel Macron told Pope Leo when they met at the Vatican before his visit to Cameroon. And so it was at the very last minute, the very last minute, that Joseph Dion Ngute was called, like a spare tire, to be informed. Late in the evening, on the eve of the day the Pope was arriving, to be informed that he will receive the Pope at the airport in lieu and place of the President of the Republic. Dion Ngute grumbled. He ate up his heart, chewed himself left and right, but had no option but to go. At the end of the day, John definitely expected that because he represented the President of the Republic at the airport with the Pope, he would definitely do the rest of the tour with the Pope, because in normal circumstances, Pope Biya had to accompany the Pope to Bamenda and then to Douala. But Ferdinand Gongo told himself that will not work, because it will give Dion Ngute some visibility. And after Dion Ngute went and fulfilled the duty of receiving the Pope at the airport, boom, they picked Atanga Ponji to be the personal representative of the head of state to accompany the Pope on the rest of his tour. Just look at these things. A lot of citizens of La République du Cameroon have asked this question over and over. Is it too difficult for Dion Ngute to pick his pen and resign from this office and offer himself at least some dignity and redeem himself, because the shame is too much, the pain is too much? As a Southern Cameroonian, I feel humiliated alone, because like it or not, Dion Ngute is a Southern Cameroonian. And what they are doing to Dion Ngute, they are sending a clear message to the people of the Southern Cameroons that as far as we are concerned, this is how you are, this is who you are, this is how we will deal with you. We will use you in this manner, use you like toilet tissue. Yeah, we will use you like a spare tire. We can do anything we want to do with you, because you will do nothing. You recall, Honorable Joseph Wiba, Salama Douali asked him, vous allez faire quoi? That's what they are telling Dion Ngute. That's what they are poking poking the fingers into the eyes of Dion Ngute and asking, vous allez faire quoi? Previously, when I said on this platform that Dion Ngute cannot even instruct a director or a director general in Cameroon. Some people said, why, Massa, why are you trying to, reduce that man literally to rubble? But it is the truth that I'm speaking. It's not lies. I saw Bruno Bijan, alias Bijan à gauche, Bijan à droite, trying to explain off that the Secretary General at the presidency of the Republic, Ferdinand Gongo, had no hand in it. It's the civil cabinet that handled this dossier. It's the civil cabinet that went up. It's the civil cabinet that went right because they noticed that the prime minister was finding difficulties getting an aircraft to travel. By the time they designate the prime minister to travel to Gabon to represent the head of state, is it the role of that prime minister to start looking for an aircraft that will take him to Gabon? Is it a personal mission? Give me a break. Is it a personal mission? Normally, before they say you are designated to go represent the head of state, the logistics are taken care of as if they were taking care of logistics for the head of state to travel. That's what it's supposed to be. Not Dion Ngute and his cabinet start struggling left and right, like some local official and some officials have said you will go you will travel to Marwa to go and do this. Your mission order has been signed and find a way. See how you will find yourself in Marwa. My goodness. Like seriously? I'm asking the question that so many people are asking. Joseph Dion Ngute, why are you doing this to yourself and to us? Joseph Dion Ngute, what is holding you down there? Haven't you had enough disgrace already? Not only for yourself, but for us all? Haven't you done more than enough? Extremely painful. Extremely painful. I said earlier that the most serious failure of leadership is a failure to foresee. Paul Biya kept showing out there how he was lonely, how he was brave, how he was this, how he was an alpha and an omega. But he did not think when he was marrying a woman who was almost or about 40 years younger than him, that there will come a time where everything will turn against him. Because what is happening to the rest of the government, and even to Joseph Dion Ngute and all of them who are in there today, is a direct result of the humiliation Paul Biya himself is receiving right now, of the imprisonment Paul Biya finds himself in right now. This is a direct consequence. But the people of the southern Cameroons, we don't deserve to find ourselves at this level. You look at what is happening. When they sent Paul Atangaji to accompany the Pope in Bamenda, the message they wanted to pass to Dion Ngute was that if you are hoping or thinking of that position of vice president or thinking of anything and all or not, know that this is another level, because that's what they do. They constantly try to hit the heads of our people and cause our people to spend their time killing each other for those positions of assistant. Those positions of assistant, For those positions of assistant. That's why you see, since they created the position of assistant secretary general at the presidency, it's only been a position where, that is where the highest southern Cameroonian and that place has ever been. That's where my brother Elung Porche is right now. That was where Inoni Ephraim was. Inoni Ephraim was there for quite some years. Those are the positions that they occupy everywhere. Position of assistant, deputy this, deputy that. In places where there are directors general, they make sure they create counterweights. And those counterweights are meant to make sure that they cannot move one step. That's what is going on. And it is not happening only here. Recall that in my very last broadcast, when I was talking about the absolutist powers that Chantal Viguru Biya had acquired, I talked about Paul Biya being imprisoned. That Paul Biya is thoroughly imprisoned. And that Paul Biya right now is being, the kind of treatment he's receiving is a kind of treatment that makes you feel like, Dove, where are you? What are you still waiting for? Of course, those doubting Thomases who thought I was just talking from the blues or talking from speculation or talking from the skies could hear from Brenda Biya, the daughter of the President of the Republic. Brenda Biya herself found time to go on social media to sound the alarm that her father is in very bad shape. She wrote, Paul Biya is dying, period. That's what Brenda Biya said. Paul Biya is dying, period. And she even said that there was much more she could say, but she wouldn't because she was even afraid for her own life. Because she said she could face repercussions. Brenda Biya stated very clearly that they have done terrible things to her and almost caused her to eat excrement. That they have tortured her left and right because sometimes she has revealed some vital information to some people, definitely in the hopes that by revealing that information to those people, it could bring some help. That information could be of help. But in the end, she was betrayed, and that is how she found herself at times, locked up in places where she could not find herself out. We now understand. So the outbursts that Brenda Biya had at some point, she was breaking things in an enclosure. And from what Chantal Biya is saying, Brenda Biya is saying, and from what I have gathered from sources close to the Biya family, they say a lot of the times they have even tried to give the impression that Brenda Biya was a psychiatric case. And so they would spend a lot of time fearing that she would go out there and say one or two things and try to intern her in psychiatric homes in Switzerland. Reason, she sometimes, will blow out there when she has the least opportunity to go out there and say one thing or the other. But she has given a glimpse into the kind of life that Paul Biya is living right now. And you will recall, sometimes we see Brenda Biya as mad. Brenda knew that her father, Paul Biya, did not want to take another mandate. Brenda knew that her father's candidature was being forced to in spite of himself. Brenda knew about all of those things. That is why at the time, Brenda did not hesitate to come out and say this. Don't vote for my dad. That she told people that don't vote for my father as president again. The child was trying to send out a message, but she feared for herself. She didn't know exactly how to pass out this message to the people because she is seeing for herself exactly what is happening at the presidential palace. She knows what her father is going through. And that's what a lot of people have asked before, but will Brenda be going through all of this and the father is just seated and not saying anything with all of what this child is just going wayward, just going everything? So we can now appreciate and understand that this child has been suffering from trauma, from serious trauma for a long time with respect to what her eyes are seeing. Brenda Biya herself has confided to some people that she was abused at the presidential palace, abused. And there were indiscretions that came out. That abuse was by Belinda Ebutu Martin when she was 13, right at the presidential palace, and nothing happened to anybody. So the child had lived through trauma, so much trauma, and that's what explains her total waywardness as we can see today. And that's Brenda again, taking the opportunity to pass out the message to the people that where Biya is, he is not. Where Biya is, he is not. That's why it says, Paul Biya is dying. She says that. Paul Biya is dying, period. That's so strong. That Paul Biya is dying, period. She knows in what kind of situation he is. And of course, who is doing all of that? Her own mother. That's why she fears for herself. I said here earlier that Chantal Biya does not forgive. Chantal Biya does not know how to, mitigate her reaction to things. That's why I've told people, where is Haja Awa? Nobody knows where Haja Awa is until today. It was on the same subject matter that Chantal Biya said enough, and Haja Awa had to be, taught a serious lesson. And again, the entire city of Yaounde is still being roiled right now by still another issue regarding Paul Biya. This is really crazy. A man of 93, heading to 94, would not solve his internal marital issues, but will allow them to escalate to the point where the country is finding itself on its knees before sons or supposed sons of the president fighting each other, drawing daggers on each other. Now you know that Georges Gilbert Baonla doesn't appear to be laughing. Georges Gilbert Baonla is not laughing. He is not joking. Georges Gilbert Baonla is claiming today that he has DNA results that clearly demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt that he is Paul Biya's son. And that is some exam that has been carried out over and over again and has come out with the same results in very trusted laboratories across the world. It's true that we will ask questions as to how did he get Paul Biya samples? How did he? It's difficult for us to tell given the circumstances in which Paul Biya finds himself. But I have to say this. It is not today that Georges Gilbert Baonla have been shouting on every rooftop in Cameroon that he is Paul Biya's son. At the time, Biya was not yet vegetable. Why was it so difficult for Paul Biya to come out there and say, this child, I don't recognize him, he's not my son? Why was it so difficult for Paul Biya to come out there and recognize him at once and for all, this is my son? Or why was it so difficult for Paul Biya to get him disciplined by the legal system and to prove to everybody that this is not my son, this is a nuisance, that this is an impostor? That was never done. That tells you that that story is not unfounded. That's the first premise. They begin by saying, actually, this story is not unfounded. Because Georges Gilbert Baonla has found himself at the presidential palace a couple of times. Georges Gilbert Baonla has entered all kinds of offices and met all kinds of state dignitaries purporting to be the son of Paul Biya. And they received him. For years, no one ever said anything. Not even Biya himself. Not even Frank Biya came out to make the noise he's making today. Oh, you have to wait until when Georges Gilbert Baonla starts saying that Frank Biya is not Paul Biya's biological son for all of these things to start becoming what they are today. So now you see on social media, there are two camps. There are those who are for Georges Gilbert Baonla is Paul Biya's son. If he wants to insist that he is not, let him come and prove. Those who are there struggling to prove by this year that Paul Biya was prime minister, his wife Jeanne-Irene Biya was working at this and was close to Georges Gilbert Baonla's mother. If you look at that time and from the time he was born, it doesn't add up. But there is some truth that you should see here. So there was a connection between Jeanne-Irene Biya and Georges Gilbert Baonla's mother. So there was some rapprochement between Paul Biya because that meant she had access to Paul Biya. So if the parents knew each other, at least that premise tells us then we need to dig further. Did Paul Biya ever know Georges Gilbert Baonla's mother carnally? Only Paul Biya can answer that question. But if Paul Biya continues to deny, then the DNA test would definitely go right ahead to show this very clearly. As for Frank Emmanuel Biya, of course, it has been a national story for a long time. One, he was not the son of Jeanne-Irene Biya. Number two, a lot of sources have made clear he was not Paul Biya's biological son. Although they kept saying, no, Paul Biya had the child by his wife's niece. According to Betty culture, they can do this. If you don't have a child for your husband, the husband can allow you to lay with one of her sisters or one of her relatives to have a child so that it stays within the family and all of those things. No. Like I said here, a patriarch, Betty patriarch, that woman was about 120 and counting when he narrated the story to me in the presence of some other colleagues, that Jeanne-Irene Biya's niece got impregnated by someone else. And it was going to be a shame. And since they didn't have a child, they decided to own the pregnancy. So since she was living with Paul Biya and his wife Jeanne-Irene Biya, they decided that she would deliver of the child, and they will take over that child and let her go and continue doing her things. He will become the son of the presidential couple. So yes, Frank Emmanuel Biya, of course, is the son of the presidential couple, but not the biological son of Paul Biya. That one is clear. I've heard it over and over until I had this confirmation from this patriarch who was talking to us about a lot of issues concerning Cameroon. So Paul Biya, therefore, also to prove, if Frank Biya really is swearing that Paul Biya is his father, to prove to, let him also do his own DNA test. This is what the Cameroon presidency has been reduced to. And this is what Cameroon as a country has been reduced to, because these tests are becoming necessary. This debate is becoming necessary because Paul Biya is transforming the country into a monarchy, and Cameroonians are marching along with it. That's really amazing. Because all this argument is like, oh no, Paul Biya has to be succeeded by his son, but it has to be his biological son. Georges Gilbert Baola says, we are only 3 biological children that Paul Biya has. Myself, Georges Gilbert Baola, Brenda, and Paul Biya Jr. Paul Biya Jr. that nobody even sees. And so he says, and so the rest, they do not belong. And that is where Frank Emmanuel Biya now gets mad and frustrated. I wonder what the French are saying in all this. Because they are the architects of this whole cacophony, of this whole nonsense. This is the kind of imperialism that we are talking about. Why they do this? Make sure that our countries remain underdeveloped. At the same time, they will come up with regulations to say, you have to stay in that poverty. Don't elope to come to places where we're extracting your wealth and making use of. No, because you are foreigners. Yet they make sure you stay at the spot. The French are being resisted everywhere except in Cameroon. So the French are being resisted everywhere except even Chad. That just yesterday, France thought they were calling the shots in that country. Young Debi Mahamad is giving Paris a lot of headache, right to the point where he ordered France to withdraw their troops from the country. Yeah, he asked for the closure of French bases in N'Djamena. And the reason is simple, because those bases are always there, and they claim that those bases are there to help protect the country and protect the French interests and all of those bases are there basically to help in regime change when they are no longer satisfied with whoever is in power, and they need to make sure that they put someone they want. Those soldiers that stay there, those troops, those bases become very useful, become very instrumental. So Debi Idris Muhammad understood that very clearly and told himself, this thing, I have to handle it right now before it consumes me someday. And that is exactly what has obfuscated the French so badly. So the world is taken aback watching this kind of ugly drama unfold in La République du Cameroun. It is terrible. And I bet you it's not going to end. I watched one lady there responding to Bruno Bijang. I said Bijang, I go Bijang at what? As my friend Mingon always calls him. You call Bruno Bijang. When on social media I watched him, he was trying to give the impression that he was a master at exactly how Paul Biya lived his life even when Bruno Bijang, was not yet born. And claiming, Paul Biya never had carnal knowledge of Georges Gilbert Baola's mother. His father was some Bamelike man who this and that, and all, and also don't know where he's coming from, those things. Trash. And I saw another lady responding to him by reminding him that there are a lot of things that they know that he doesn't know, still so young, doesn't have any clear idea of what is happening. In fact, what I'm trying to say here, or what I'm pointing out here, is that this is what is animating Cameroon right now. And it is painful to watch, shameful, disgusting to imagine that noble people like us southern Cameroonians find ourselves entangled into this kind of mess. That is why my closing submission of this platform today is to remind the people of the southern Cameroons we have work ahead, and we must do the needful. We must work very hard to ensure that, as a matter of fact, La République du Cameroon gets out of our territory. We must work hard to restore the independence of our country and, make it the thriving democracy that it always has been, and make our country a land of milk and honey. We have all it takes to transform the Southern Cameroons, to make it a place to be and to make it a global destination, to the point our children and our children's children will not find themselves going elsewhere to go and look for greener pastures and create those greener pastures right back home. Thank you very much for your very kind attention. If you were here for the first time, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, personalize, so that anytime anything drops here, you'll be the first to know. And of course, do not also forget to share the link as much as you can. We generally do that on this platform. And then make sure to drop a comment, be part of the conversation. But please, no personal attacks. Stay on the facts, stay on the issues, and be constructive in your approach. And then do not forget to drop a like. It generally goes a long way. Thank you very much for your very kind attention. To God be the glory.